Hello again, and welcome back to part 2, and this is dent bashing, filling and sanding. Off we go. So we've got this rather dented and rusty Diane panel, and we're going to try and get all the dents out of it to make it perfect again. And it's quite a nasty dent at the front there, as you can see, pushed in, and some previous bodge in there with bashed outwards, so that needs flattening down. Anything pushing up needs flattening down for sure. So we'll start with this front dent. We're going to take the tension out the top of the dent, tapping it down. Now don't worry, this is not 13 minutes of me bashing bits of metal. Well, it is, but I'm going to speed it up a little bit so you don't have to put up with a bang, 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 bang. Now we're using light here, see how our progress is going. Now I'm using a proper hammer and dolly set. Now that's before and that's afterwards, so you can see that using light, as in here, this is being pushed up from underneath with a piece of wood. Access is difficult there on a Diane because of the bonnet catch, and we're just trying to get the worst of the dent out without creasing it up too much. And hammer and dolly being used here on these side sections, and anything that is sticking up needs to be flatted down for sure. And feeling over with your fingers there to see exactly how progress is coming on. Now, after me saying that you must use a hammer and dolly, I'm not using a dolly on that particular bit. And you'll see quite a bit throughout this video that as the dents get popped up and bashed out, I often go around afterwards and tap them down from the top as well, around the outside. And that's before and that's afterwards. And the reason for that is because the metal will not be completely flat when you bash it up from underneath. Okay, so we're going around and straightening up some edges there, look, with a pair of pliers. Lots of crinkles and dents on all of A-series panels on the sides there, and just easily sorted out with a pair of pliers until everything is as flat as you can make it. Now, sorry about the bad camera work here, it's not that brilliant, but you can see what we're having to do is make sure anything that is sticking up is flatted down, or it doesn't matter if it's even slightly lower than the rest of the surface of the panel. You just can't have anything sticking up, because when you do sand, you'll take we'll sand flat, and you'll take the top off that and it'll be shiny, and all the rest of it won't be touched. So it needs to be flat or lower than the rest of the panel. Now, here's my best friend Charles, the only friend I've got in the garage actually, and he follows me about everywhere. I'm worried about him actually, he's been sucking a lot of shit up his nose lately. And you can see he's attached to the Charles and sucks all the dust up through the holes. We're starting off with quite a rough grit, actually 120 grit. We're aiming to get all of the top coat of paint off and to see what we're dealing with really. Now, I'm quite lucky with this panel in as much as it's never been painted before. This is original Citroen paint, and I stopped then and took the panel outside and put it on the car. The reason for this is you don't want to go too far without trial fitting the panel on the car, because you don't want to get into the realms of realising there's some doesn't fit, and when it's all covered in a gorgeous fresh paint, that's not the time to be trying to sort it into fitting. So flat sanding always. When I say flat sanding, I mean the sander itself is kept flat to the shape of the panel. I'm not pressing hard either. There's quite gentle force required here. You let the grinding pad do all the work, and just flat everything down as much as possible to see what you're actually dealing with and how flat the panel really is, and work around all the edges. Now, when you sand flat like this, you'll realise that you can see things that you can't see with the naked eye when the panel's got its paint on. The dark coloured blue there is where the sander hasn't touched it at all, and there's some areas here and there where there's a little low spot that you wouldn't know was there until you sanded it flat. Another little trick is to get your fingernail and try and get it in anything that you see, like those little marks there. Anything you can get your fingernail in will definitely show in the finished job. And so using a dolly again from the top, I'm bashing the tops of the dent down, the tension points of the dent, and a combination of sanding and tapping down from the bottom and the top, gentle taps on the top, just to see how flat you can actually get it. Now, you probably won't get it absolutely perfect. We will need a little skim of filler, but we're just trying to keep the filler down to a minimum and to keep the absolute shape of the panel perfect. Tricky on a Diane, especially with these side parts here where it goes from concave to convex. Pretty difficult to sand there. Easy on the outside edges, but not on the inside parts. So working, keep sanding and tapping and sanding and tapping until we've got some semblance of flatness. Using light as always to see where you are. Here you can see there's still a little bit of a ding there, but that's quite fillable as it is now, and we're taking the majority out of the dent and carrying on with sanding. Now you can't press very hard here at all. You can see the panel actually flexing as I'm sanding, so you really don't want to press very hard at all because your sanding won't be even then. A couple of other things to know about dents on A-series panels is the metal stretches really quite easily. So if you get a big dent, the metal itself will be bigger than the space it used to take up, if you know what I mean. It's actually been stretched, so you won't ever get it completely flat, but you just need to aim to get as flat as possible. Some areas you will need to do by hand, both on 2CVs and Dianes, where you really can't get a tool in there. Okay, this is called onion board, I think it's called. Lots of sheets of special paper that don't get affected by filler, and you can peel them off one by one. I really rate this filler as well, the U-Pole fantastic body filler. It really is fantastic stuff. Very good, easy to sand and lightweight, nice to work with. And you want a pea size of hardener compared to a golf ball size of filler. Now we try and put this on as flat as possible as well. It doesn't matter about being too neat at this sort of stage. Obviously it's all going to be sanded back down again. And don't worry too much about tiny little ding holes in it either, because that can be sorted out in a minute as well. What we're aiming for is a very even coating of filler over the complete area and wiping any large amounts of excess off. Any parts where you see a dark part of paint like that little blob in the centre there, that's a low spot and it gets filled over. Now you don't have to wait 24 hours, I just happen to in this case. And we start with a slightly finer grade of grit now, 240 grit on the same sander. Very lightweight. I'm only just using the weight of the actual the sander. I'm only using the weight of the sander itself to actually sand that down. Okay, so moving on then to the side and trying to just get it as smooth and as flat as possible. There'll be a lot more sanding yet, but trying to get as good as you can with as little filler used as possible. Tricky to work on those edges on a Diane there. You have to end up hand sanding them in the end. Now when I say sand flat, this is what I mean. You follow the contours of the panel. Now there's a central crease line down the centre of a Diane panel, and you're seeing I'm sanding up to that point and keeping it at that angle. And then I move across to this side and sand at that angle. And that way the flatness is kept perfect and the crease line is defined even through the filler, as you can see there. And then same at the front, work around the front, work around the edges, and we'll get it as good as we can really at this stage. Now I've slowed this bit down so you can see the sort of speed we're working at and how gentle the sanding actually is. We're just going very gently over the top, up to the crease line and that angle, and then moving across to this crease line and this angle. And that way, in the finished job, the crease line would look perfect. Now this is useful stuff, pre-wipe degreaser, or panel wipe as it's often called. Very good of my company to buy that for me. We want to just wipe over when you think you've getting close to it being very, very smooth, and change the lighting or shine a light from the side. Now we're looking at the reflection here of the door, because by using a bit of panel wipe and the shininess there, you can see where you are. You can see just how good the finish is going to be when it's gloss at the end. Now this is the only way to actually do this at this stage, because of course everything's very matte and you can't see through with the reflections. Now we move up the grades as we go with the paper and block sanding, and I'm just keep soaking them and leave them to soak for a little while. And like I say, always sand flat, using a little block sander. Now this is the part of the panel that was welded, so this is the welded repair corner. and sanding flat and making sure that we've got that crease defined in the finished job. When you wipe over with it, a bit of panel wipe again and see the shine, use the light reflected there to actually see what it's going to look like when it's got paint on it. And it's not too bad. There's a bit of a dent on the side there, and there's a bit of a ripple and a ding at the top there, which needs to be sort of filled a little bit more, I think, but not too bad. I think in the finished job you're hard pressed to actually tell that that had been repaired at all. There's a little hole there as well that we're going to deal with later, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. Now we're moving on to some of the other parts there. This is obviously particular to a Diane, but it'd be very similar for other parts and bits and pieces on a 2CV. For instance, headlights or anything else. You need to dismantle all the part completely to get everything off it, get all the rust out, and see what you're dealing with and getting dents and rust out each individual panel. Now, someone stood on this or something in the past, and it's not looking that fantastic. But same again, bend it straight as best you can. The beauty of this metal is, in some ways, because it's 0.7 millimeters thick, it's very easy to dent. But the beauty also is it's very easy to put back straight again. So I'm using the straight part of the vise there to actually, and a piece of wood, a little piece of doweling, to actually tap the worst of the dents out, and then start with the sanding. So it's a process of taking the paint off, seeing where you are with the dents all the way through. I'm using a multi-tool here actually, which is a great little tool I've got, or a palm sander or a hand sander would be useful too, because you can get into corners and places where you couldn't any other way. Okay, here's a little tip for you. Citroen, in their infinite wisdom, made pretty much all of the trim parts on A-series Citroens out of either stainless or aluminium, and means it can be cleaned up really easily. Now this is a piece of very soft wire wool, one of the softest grades that you can get, and by very gently rubbing over what appears to be a really terrible rusty mess, you can see they come up like new. And it's a very satisfying thing to do. It looks like a big rusty mess, but you can see it's just gently rubbing over there, and it will come up without any scratches and like new with soft wire wool. This also works with the trims on the doors on 2CVs and Dianes, the aluminium pieces. Now working around the panel with 600, we're starting to see there's some little shiny bits here and there. Now that is like a high spot, so we're just going to tap those down. We can't have any eye spots or little ripples, as you can see, using the light there on this particular section. So it just needs another little skim of filler there, here and there. Another top tip with filler is to use a baby wipe. Where you don't want the filler to be, you can wipe it back off again while it's still wet. Also, baby wipe will get the filler off the tool that you use to put it on with. So final sanding over the top, especially when you use cellulose paints, which you might well be doing with spray cans. The preparation to this sort of level of flatness is really critical, because you see absolutely everything through cellulose spray can because it's so thin. Okay, so when you think you're finished, there we are, we're ready for painting. So there we are, finished panel ready for paint. And that will be in the next section, which is part 3 to follow, painting. See you all then. Thanks, Em.